Benjamin Netanyahu has submitted a plan outlining what role the state of Israel will play in the Gaza Strip once the war ends. The blueprint is the first formal post-war vision presented to Parliament. The plan, that's scant on details, calls for Israel to control security in a demilitarized Gaza Strip. We can now bring in Rob Geist Pinfold, lecturer in peace and security at Durham University School of Government and International Affairs. Great to have you with us here on France 24. Now, this plan from Netanyahu seems to fly in the face of what the United States and the international community have been saying they want, yet here we are. Is this Netanyahu's way of staying in the game once the war ends?
I think what this is more like is an attempt by Netanyahu to buy time. He's been pressured repeatedly by the US in particular, but also by colleagues within Israel's war cabinet to delineate a post-war plan. How does Israel manage to secure the Gaza Strip and prevent something like the October 7th attacks happening again? Now, he's been very, very unwilling to do that because it would expose tension and exacerbate tension within his coalition between centrists and far-right members of the cabinet who actually have expressed a preference for not just continuing to occupy Gaza, but even resettling or annexing parts of Gaza. Now, it's important to stress that this document is very, very thin on details. It's only a short one-pager, and it basically says nothing new under the sun. It's a continuation and kind of basically Netanyahu combining all of his previous declarations into one single document, but there's nothing here that suggests that Netanyahu is moving towards the US position, which would push for a reconstruction of Gaza, for example, with the Palestinian Authority or with international partners. This is all about Israel establishing semi-permanent security control over the Gaza Strip and expanding its buffer zone inside the territory.
But it's no surprise that the Palestinian Authority seems to have come out and rejected this plan.
Well, that's a given because Netanyahu, even though the plan does not mention the Palestinian Authority at all, Netanyahu has been explicit that he will not allow the Palestinian Authority into Gaza to reconstruct the territory. Again, that's a position that the Biden administration has been advocating and something that has caused significant friction and tension in US-Israel relations. The plan does call, it does say that though Israel will have indefinite security control over Gaza, it will be rather hands-off in its governance of the Gaza Strip civilians. It says that in this role will basically be filled by local notables or groups and individuals who have administrative experience but no ties to extremist groups. And now, how exactly you would find these kind of people, let alone convince them to work with Israel on this, is very much an open question. Anyone who has been in an administrative role in the Gaza Strip has worked with Hamas in the past because Hamas has been the de facto government of the territory. Indeed. So again, this poses more questions than it answers in this document.
Let's talk about a glimmer of hope, because we do have some possible good news coming. If a ceasefire agreement is clinched here in Paris over the weekend, the Israeli war cabinet has approved sending the head of Mossad for those talks. Initial talks over in Egypt were apparently positive. Are there any guarantees that whatever agreement is clinched here in Paris won't be shredded by Israel's Prime Minister?
Well, again, this is all to do with internal pressure and contradictions within Israel's cabinet in terms of their goals. Now, there is broad political support in Israel after the October 7th attacks for destroying Hamas or significantly degrading its capabilities. The division is between whether that should be prioritized or whether the release of the 130 and more hostages held by Hamas should be prioritized. More dovish Israelis tend to lean towards releasing those hostages, even if Israel will have to pay a steep price and end its campaign against Hamas. More hawkish Israelis, particularly Netanyahu's allies, prioritize destroying Hamas. We had Israel's finance minister Bezalel Smotrich say yesterday that getting the hostages released was not actually his top priority, which created a political storm within Israel. So these talks are going ahead with Netanyahu under pressure, not just from those far rightists, but also from centrists within his cabinet, like Benny Gantz in the war cabinet, who has repeatedly prioritized the release of the hostages and has said that, has basically created an out for Hamas and said that if there is a deal reached, then Israel will delay its entry into Rafah, which again is something that hawks like Netanyahu have been prioritizing at the expense of talks over the hostages.
Now, Israel says its offensive of Rafah looms. It's going to go in one way or the other. While it mulls when to do this, we have the humanitarian situation in the enclave that continues to collapse. Today, we have the head of UNRWA who's saying they've reached breaking point. For months, there have been calls to increase aid flows into the Gaza Strip. Israel has either dragged its feet. In recent weeks, we have settlers who have been blocking convoys from getting in. The US has leverage over Israel. Why isn't Joe Biden using it?
Well, I think it would be false to claim that there's no tension between the US and Israel. And indeed, I'm sure
Yes,
there's
but
been some
there have
very
been tensions,
difficult
but
discussions.
I mean, besides tensions and the two seeing eye to eye, they still the convoys don't seem to be going in at the flows they need to be going in.
Right, and you also had the US vetoing the UN resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. And again, it's important to stress that there are disagreements, but these disagreements are taking place behind closed doors at the moment. The US is basically being very critical with Israel, but privately, not publicly. This is the normal modus operandi for the US to express frustration with what Israel's doing. Now, I don't think it's fair to say the US has done nothing. Possibly the key reason why Israel has not entered Rafah yet is because the US has publicly said we will not back this offensive unless Israel has a clear plan to provide aid and assistance to the civilians there, who have all been moved there, by the way, by Israel's own directives and pressure, basically, to move people from North Gaza to southern Gaza. So that humanitarian crisis has been exacerbated by Israeli strategy and a false belief that it could just basically isolate its military operations to North Gaza. So there is pressure. It's just maybe it's not as tangible as people would like. It's not as public as people would like. But as this war drags on, particularly as we get up to Ramadan in March, I think you're going to see those disagreements becoming increasingly more public.
We'll see if that holds true. Rob Geist Pinfold, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you very much.